You remember the shot, the camera lifting, the whole valley opening up, and there in the dust below, that giant word spelled out in white stones. Goodbye. The helicopter rising. Hawkeye Pierce finally going home. On the night of February 28, 1983, over 100 million Americans watched that ending together. It felt like closure. It felt earned. But what if that helicopter never came? What if the armistice arrived, the camp packed up, and the man everyone expected to fly out simply did not get on board? What would Hawkeye Pierce have become if he had chosen to stay? Think about what that final episode really was. 2.5 hours of television built around one single idea, that after 11 years in a war he hated, Hawkeye Pierce was going to leave. The writers designed the entire finale around his breakdown, his recovery, his goodbye, the stones in the field, the tearful farewells, the last jeep out of camp. Every image was a permission slip to let him go. Now imagine you take that permission slip away. Imagine the peace talks succeed at Panmunjom. The order comes down. The 4077th is being dismantled. The tents come down around him, the operating room gets crated up, the cots are folded, and Hawkeye is still standing there in his olive-drab fatigues, watching. BJ asks him when his transport lifts off. Hawkeye does not answer. Colonel Potter tries next. Same silence. Because in this version of the story, the man who spent 11 seasons screaming that he wanted out of Korea suddenly realizes he does not know how to leave it. For years, viewers watched that character as a survivor. He drank at the still, he made jokes. He broke down in the finale and pieced himself back together. The show sold him as a man desperate to go home. But if you look at how he was written, how he clung to routine, how he mothered the wounded, how he lit up when a chopper came in loaded with work, you can see the second reading underneath. Maybe Hawkeye survived Korea by needing it. And if he needed it, letting it end might have been worse than staying. So he stays. The camp closes. Everyone else goes home. And the question becomes, who does he become when the war he built his identity around is finally over? The first person to feel it would have been his father. Anyone who watched the show remembers Daniel Pierce even though he never once appeared on screen. He lived in the letters. Every season, Hawkeye wrote home to his father in Crabapple Cove, Maine, and every season those letters carried the weight of the whole series. Daniel was the reason Hawkeye kept counting the days. He was the promise of a small clapboard house, a lobster boat, a quiet civilian practice. The homecoming episode fans got in the real finale was really a homecoming to him. In this version, that reunion never happens. Picture the letter instead. A single envelope arriving in Maine months after the ceasefire, in an older, tighter version of his son's handwriting. It says he has decided to stay. It says he is needed. It says he is sorry. Daniel Pierce, who spent 11 years marking a calendar he did not want to mark anymore, walks down to the train station out of habit anyway. He waits. The train comes and goes. His son is not on it. The station clears, and an old country doctor walks back up the road alone, carrying a letter he already knew was coming before he opened it. The homecoming viewers felt like relief. This version would have felt like a wound that never closes. And Hawkeye was not the only person whose ending would have shifted. Think about BJ Hunnicutt. The character Mike Farrell played was written for a very specific job. When Wayne Rogers left after season 3 and Trapper John was gone, the show needed a new emotional counterweight for Hawkeye. Someone gentler. Someone with a wife and daughter waiting. Someone who could carry the mustache. The letters home to Peg. The quiet decency the show had started leaning into. BJ was built as the friend Hawkeye would grieve losing. The real finale gave that friendship its perfect goodbye. The motorcycle, the stone spelling out the word Hawkeye had been waiting for. The hug beside the chopper. It is one of the most remembered moments in classic television. In this version, BJ still goes home. Peg is waiting. Erin is bigger now. There is no motorcycle, no stone message, no cinematic hug. There is just a man boarding a plane, while his best friend stays behind in a country that is about to stop being a war zone and start being something harder to describe. At first, the letters would come often. BJ writing from Mill Valley, about civilian medicine, about backyard barbecues, about a life Hawkeye chose not to have. Hawkeye writing back about a clinic, about long nights, about patients whose names would mean nothing in California. The letters would slow. That is how these things always go. Not a fight, not a break, just distance and time, and the quiet weight of two men who used to save each other in an operating room, and now cannot quite explain their lives to each other on paper. The finale gave viewers a hug. This version replaces it with a mailbox that gets emptier every year. Somewhere in the 1970s, Peg finds a stack of the old letters tied together in a drawer, and asks BJ if he ever writes anymore. He does not answer right away. Some friendships end. Others just quietly stop being able to reach across the distance they were built inside of. But Hawkeye would not be entirely alone in Korea. Not at first, because someone else on that show had been quietly planning to stay long before the writers ever thought about ending it. Father Mulcahy. William Christopher played him for the full run of the series, and if you go back and watch the later seasons carefully, you can see the writers slowly turning him into the moral center of the whole camp. His storylines moved further and further away from the operating room, and closer to something quieter. He kept talking about the orphanage. He kept collecting money for it. He kept mentioning the children by name. By the time the finale arrived, Mulcahy had lost most of his hearing from an explosion near the orphanage, and the last conversation he has in the real episode is about staying to help. Now imagine Hawkeye stays with him. The camp is gone. The signposts, the mess tent, the swamp with the still, all packed onto trucks and sent somewhere else. But down the road, past the ruined bridges, there is a small building full of children who lost everything, and a priest who cannot hear very well anymore, trying to run it. Hawkeye shows up with a doctor's bag and no jokes. And this is where the character we grew up with starts to change. The Hawkeye viewers remember was defined by his mouth, the wisecracks, the flirtation, the sarcasm aimed at anyone in a higher rank. In a room full of orphaned children who do not speak his language, and a priest who cannot always hear him, the punchlines stop working. He learns to be quiet. He learns to listen. He learns Korean well enough to ask a child where it hurts. The clown who spent 11 seasons hiding his grief behind a joke discovers that the joke was never the point. That would have been the first real gut punch of this alternate ending. Not a death, not a scandal, just the sound of Hawkeye Pierce learning to work in silence. The dog tags stay in a drawer. The old fatigues get replaced with civilian clothes he does not quite recognize himself in. The still is gone. The mess tent trays are gone. What is left is a small room with a bare bulb, a stethoscope, and children who need a doctor more than they need a joke. But the war ending did not mean Korea suddenly became peaceful, and that is the part the show mostly kept off camera. Here is a fact the series carried on its shoulders without ever making it the story. The Korean War never actually ended. In July of 1953, the armistice at Panmunjom stopped the shooting, but no peace treaty was ever signed. The country stayed cut in half. The border stayed tense. Villages that had been leveled during the fighting had to be rebuilt from nothing. Refugees kept moving. Medical care was scarce. Landmines stayed in the ground for decades. For most of the men and women who lived through it, the ceasefire was not a happy ending. It was the start of a very long, very quiet aftermath. The real Mass *H was, at its heart, a comedy about a war it kept pretending was almost over. The show ran for 11 years to depict a conflict that lasted 3. Time moved strangely inside the 4077th. Nobody aged. The war never really ended, even as the show inched closer to its finale. In this version, time finally moves. The armistice holds. The soldiers go home. And Hawkeye Pierce, an American surgeon with no reason to be there anymore, watches the country he was sent to try again to become itself. He works through the 1950s in a country still bleeding. He watches the border harden into concrete and wire. He watches the villages he treated in 1953 slowly become towns again through the 1960s. He watches boys who were his patients grow up and have children of their own. The show we got was a Korean war comedy. This version becomes a Korean post-war drama. Same doctor, different weight. And the people back home would have kept asking one question, quietly, at every reunion, every anniversary special, every magazine profile, whatever happened to Hawkeye? Real Mass *H fans know something you may have forgotten. After the finale aired in 1983, CBS actually kept part of the world alive. A spin-off called Aftermash launched that same year, following Colonel Potter, Klinger, and Father Mulcahy back to a stateside veterans hospital in Missouri. It ran for 2 seasons before quietly being canceled in 1985. Alan Alda was never in it. Hawkeye's absence was written into the show. He had gone home. He was living somewhere in Maine. He just was not part of this story anymore. In our alternate version, Aftermash still exists. Same hospital. Same characters trying to figure out civilian life. But now the missing chair is different. Now, when Klinger mentions the old camp, when Potter looks at the picture on his desk, when Mulcahy pauses at the sound of a name he has not heard in a while, the absence has a specific shape. Hawkeye is not home in Crabapple Cove. He is still over there, and nobody quite knows how to say it. The reunion specials would have carried the same weight. Every anniversary interview, every retrospective on TV Land, every VHS box set with the whole cast on the cover, all of it shadowed by one seat that stays empty. The cast talks about him in past tense at press events. The public reads about him in profiles that end with the same phrase. Last known to be practicing medicine in Korea. The character viewers loved most becomes the one they hear about least. And that is how you get the strangest reversal in this whole story. Because eventually, in this version, one of them goes looking for him. Loretta Sweet played Margaret Houlihan for the full 11 seasons, and it is worth pausing on what that arc actually was. She came in as Hot Lips, a nickname the show later regretted. She was written as a punchline. Over the years, the writers realized what they had. Slowly, the character stopped being the joke and started being one of the earliest sustained portrayals on American television of a woman building a serious professional identity inside a male institution. By the finale, Margaret was not Hot Lips anymore. She was a career army nurse, a leader, a full person. Her goodbye to Hawkeye in the real episode is one of the most quietly devastating scenes in the whole run. In this version, that goodbye does not happen the way we saw it. Instead, imagine years later. Colonel Margaret Houlihan, now a senior officer in the Army Nurse Corps, is sent to Korea in the 1960s or early 1970s on some kind of military medical inspection. She is older, her uniform is sharper, her posture is different. She lands at a base that used to be a battlefield, and she asks quietly, in the officers' club that night, whether anyone has ever heard of an American surgeon who never went home. Somebody has, somebody always has, and the next morning, a jeep takes her out to a small clinic near a village she has never been to. The reunion viewers were promised in the real finale would have arrived here instead. Wrong country, wrong decade, two people who never quite said what they meant to each other, standing in a doorway that neither of them ever imagined. He is grayer, she is a colonel. There is no laugh track, there is no music cue. There is just a doctor who stayed and a nurse who came back, and a lot of years neither of them can undo. Whatever they say to each other in that room stays in that room. That is the version this alternate ending would have earned. Not romance, not closure, just recognition. Two survivors meeting on the other side of everything. She would have flown back to Washington and never spoken about the visit publicly. He would have gone back to his clinic the next morning. The reunion the show promised its audience for 11 years would have belonged only to them, unrecorded, unaired, unremembered by anyone outside that small room in a country neither of them was ever supposed to still be inside, and the final image would have looked nothing like the one we got. Think about the last shot of the real finale, the chopper lifting off, the camera pulling back, the word goodbye spelled out in stones on the ground below, holding still as the helicopter climbs away. That image was designed to give a whole country closure. 11 years of a series and a decade of shared Monday nights, all held in one wide aerial shot. The stones were the show's way of thanking the audience. In this version, there are no stones. Picture it instead as an older man walking up a hillside somewhere in South Korea in the 1980s or 1990s. The camp is long gone. The mess tent, the operating room, the swamp, all of it packed onto trucks and driven away decades ago. What is there now is grass, maybe a farm, maybe a row of trees the wind moves through. The hillside where the 4077th used to sit is a place with no marker. Nothing spelled out on the ground, no message for a camera to find. The man stands there a while. That is all. He does not say anything. He is not performing the ending. He is just a doctor who chose the war he could never really leave, standing on the piece of ground where his life turned into what it was going to be. The ending we got was catharsis. Millions of people crying together on a Monday night, watching the helicopter climb and the stones sit still, feeling the show release them at last. It was one of the greatest goodbyes in the history of American television, and it is still cited as the most watched scripted broadcast in this country's history. The ending we did not get would have been grief, quieter, lonelier, without a laugh track, without a swelling score, without a wide shot to make it feel finished. Just a man on a hillside, in a country that was never fully at peace, in a life that was never fully explained to the people who used to love him. Mass *H ran on CBS from 1972 to 1983. It fought its network for years to keep the laugh track out of the operating room scenes and mostly won. Its theme, Suicide is Painless, drifted out of living rooms all over the country on Monday nights for over a decade. Its cast covered TV Guide again and again. Its finale drew somewhere near 106 million viewers in a single evening, a number no scripted show has touched since. In syndication, on local stations, on cable marathons, on VHS box sets, on TV Land afternoons, it kept finding new viewers well into the 1990s and beyond. We got the version where Hawkeye Pierce went home. We got the stones in the field, the hug beside the helicopter, the letter home to a father who finally got to hold his son again. We got the ending American television needed in 1983. Warm, wide, watched together. But somewhere in the story we did not get, there is a version where he stays, where the letter to Maine goes unanswered forever, where the friendship with BJ becomes a slow silence, where Father Mulcahy's orphanage keeps its doors open a little longer because of him, where Margaret Houlihan finds him decades later in a country neither of them ever really left, where the man defined by his mouth learns to work without saying much of anything at all, and the last image is not a helicopter climbing away from stones in a field. It is an older Hawkeye Pierce, standing on empty grass in a country that never fully ended its war, choosing, one more time, not to go home. Somewhere out past every rerun and every VHS tape and every long syndicated afternoon, that version of him is still up there on that hill. Just wind, just grass, just a man who stayed.